Welcome to the deep dive where we grab a whole bunch of sources, really fascinating stuff, and pull out the key knowledge you need.
Without
Yeah,
burying you in the detail.
exactly, right.
Oh,
Today, we are, I guess, locked in a battle for survival as we dissect the 2004 cinematic showdown, Alien versus Predator.
oh, this will be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one that a lot of people probably saw,
Right.
back in the day, and maybe haven't revisited it. And,
Yeah.
it's definitely, I think, a film that
It's one of those that people feel very strongly about
exactly.
one way or the other.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
And for this deep dive, you've pulled together a really interesting collection of sources.
I did.
We've got the core facts from IMDb,
Right.
the FAQs, the complete cast and crew list, the main synopsis.
Yeah.
But then we've got this added layer of fan reactions and behind-the-scenes trivia that really give us, I think, a full picture of this crossover event.
Yeah, and this crossover event is one of those things that, as we were talking about before we hit record, had a very long gestation period, a long time coming.
Yeah.
And, started really before the internet as we know it even existed.
Right, right.
So it's interesting to see how this all kind of developed.
Yeah, and I mean, our mission, I guess, today is to really understand, how this project came to life, explore kind of the nuts and bolts of its production, and really get a sense of how it landed with audiences both then
Yep.
and maybe how it stands up now.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump right in, I guess.
Yeah.
The idea of these two iconic creatures, facing off wasn't exactly, hatched in a studio pitch meeting, was it?
It sounds like it had a much more
It sounds like it had a much more
organic beginning.
Yeah, organic beginning.
It did. What's really intriguing about this is that this was planted way back in 1990
Wow.
with, Predator 2.
Right.
Remember the quick glimpse into the Predator's trophy collection?
Yeah.
For those of you who have eagle eyes, you'll remember there was an unmistakable alien skull amongst the spoils.
Oh, yeah. That was one of those blink and you'll miss it moments.
Right.
That, I feel like everyone was suddenly talking about.
It was.
And it really sparked something.
It did.
I mean, it was just the skull.
Right.
But it was like, oh, wow.
It was the seed
Yeah.
that was planted, and it just took root.
Yeah, yeah.
And, while it was initially, I think, intended as just a fun Easter egg, a nod to the Alien versus Predator comic book series that was already building a following, that single visual, really ignited the imaginations of fans.
Yeah.
And that crossover concept, it thrived in the early 90s through comics, video games, toys, novels.
Yeah, there was that whole expanded universe for Alien versus Predator.
Well, I mean, by the time the movie was seriously on the table,
Right, yeah.
there was already this massive appetite for this clash on screen that people had been, enjoying for almost 15 years at that point.
Yeah, so the fan base was definitely, I guess, primed
Primed
and ready.
But it's still, 14 years, that's a surprisingly long time to actually make it happen.
Right.
Like, why such a long wait?
That's a great question, and it really highlights the complex journey that films often take,
Right.
While the fan enthusiasm was there, bringing two major franchises with their own established mythologies, their own, universes, together undoubtedly presented creative and logistical hurdles.
Yeah.
And, negotiating the rights, finding the right story, getting the green light from the studios. I mean, all that takes...
It all takes time.
Yeah. And money.
Yeah.
And, and perhaps they wanted to ensure the concept was just right.
Right.
Before committing to such a significant crossover.
Right. It's not something you want to,
Yeah.
rush into.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to mess it up.
Yeah. So when the cameras finally did roll, who was the main, I guess, creative force steering the ship?
The director's chair and a co-writing credit went to Paul W.S. Anderson.
Okay.
And, he also has a story credit.
Okay.
Alongside some of the original architects of these universes.
Oh, wow.
Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett,
Yeah.
The creators of the Alien characters, and Jim and John Thomas, who gave us the Predator.
So you've got kind of that blend of the original DNA.
A little bit of that original DNA in there.
Yeah, involved in crafting this encounter.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, very interesting.
That is interesting. It sounds like they also made some pretty strategic decisions about where and how they filmed.
Yes.
Especially when it came to keeping the budget in check.
Yes, absolutely.
It sounds like they were very budget conscious for this film.
Location can have a massive impact on costs. Anderson himself mentioned that filming those elaborate sets in Prague brought the cost down to about $2 million.
Wow.
Compared to a potential $20 million if they had built them in Hollywood.
Wow, that's a huge, huge difference.
That's a massive difference.
Yeah.
And, that likely allowed them to allocate resources to other crucial aspects like, the creature effects.
Right.
Within their $60 million budget.
Right. So maybe they saved money there to,
Right. It was a trade-off.
Spend more on creatures.
It was all about, putting the money where they felt it was most needed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like they are also pretty efficient with their time, both during the actual filming and in post-production.
Yeah.
It seems like they were on a pretty tight schedule. For this film.
What's striking is the relatively short time frame. Principal photography wrapped in about 2.5 months. And post-production was completed in just 4 months.
Wow, that's fast.
For a major studio film in 2004.
Yeah.
Especially one relying heavily on visual effects.
Right.
Those are very tight schedules.
Yeah.
And, it suggests a very focused and perhaps even a slightly pressured production.
Now, in terms of the actors, was there anyone in the cast who had a direct link back to either of the original franchises? Someone who could maybe bridge that gap?
Yes, absolutely.
For the audience?
A key connection was Lance Henriksen.
Oh, okay.
And he was the first actor cast.
Wow. Okay.
And, he's instantly recognizable to Alien fans as
Bishop. Right, from Aliens.
From Aliens. Alien. His character in Alien versus Predator is Charles Bishop Weyland.
Oh, okay.
And he even provides a potential origin point for the Bishop androids.
Right, okay.
Within that fictional universe. So it's a nice bit of connective tissue there.
Yeah, that's clever. Yeah, that's clever. So what about our lead human character?
Sure.
Alexa Woods, played by Sanaa Lathan. How'd she come into the picture?
The casting for Alexa Woods sounds like it was a real race against time.
Okay.
Apparently they considered hundreds of actresses.
Oh, wow.
And Sanaa Lathan was chosen just a week.
A week.
Before filming started.
Wow.
Literally had to, get on a plane to Prague almost immediately.
Wow. That's a last-minute decision.
Last minute.
Yeah.
And that kind of last-minute decision often indicates a challenging search to find the perfect fit for a crucial role.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So.
And who was the person responsible for, bringing the predators themselves to life on screen in this film?
Interestingly, all 3 of the main predators, Scar, Celtic, and Chopper, were played by the same actor.
Wow. Okay.
Ian White.
Wow.
A very, very tall guy. And, he had the significant task of being the first actor to step into the predator suits.
Right.
Since the original actor, Kevin Peter Hall, sadly passed away in 1991.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, he was following in some big footsteps there.
Yeah. Wow. That's one actor for all 3. That must have been physically demanding, but also really understanding those nuances
for the character.
Yeah, definitely a challenge.
Now, visually, the movie seemed to lean quite heavily on practical effects. That's using, actual suits, models.
Yes.
Rather than relying solely on CGI.
Yes.
Was that a conscious decision?
It was.
Okay.
Anderson specifically wanted to use practical effects as much as possible.
Correct.
He was aiming for around 70% of the scenes.
Wow.
To feature, tangible elements,
right.
Creature suits, puppets, miniatures.
Yeah.
And, the thinking behind that was that having those physical creatures on set
can really lend a greater sense of realism.
Sure, yeah.
And presence.
Yeah.
And potentially make them more impactful.
Yeah.
And even frightening for the audience.
Yeah.
Than purely digital creations.
Right. It's that sort of uncanny valley.
Right. You want to avoid that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, they did use CGI to enhance these practical effects.
They did.
But, yeah, it
was really a blend of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah. To achieve that final look.
Cool. And the alien queen in this film was notably larger, more imposing than we'd seen before.
Than we'd seen before.
Why was that?
Well, the Antarctic Xenomorph queen was designed to be significantly bigger than the queens in previous Alien films and comics.
Okay.
And the in-universe idea is that she was ancient, believed to be hundreds of years old.
Oh, wow.
And had presided over countless
wow.
predator initiation hunts.
Okay, so she's like a...
So this suggests a kind of growth
with
age and experience,
right.
From a filmmaking perspective.
Yeah.
This larger scale certainly made her a more formidable physical presence for the actors and the practical effects team to work with.
Yeah. So, I mean, operating that massive animatronic queen must have been an incredibly complex undertaking.
It was
like, how did they bring her to life?
A major feat of puppetry and engineering.
Oh.
The animatronic queen required a team of up to 12 puppeteers.
12 puppeteers.
Working simultaneously.
Wow.
Each controlling different parts of her body.
Wow. So they're all kind of like...
Yeah, it's like a
concert.
It's a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
A well-oiled, biomechanical machine.
Wow.
And they also utilized a motion control rig.
Okay.
Which is essentially a computer control system that can record and precisely repeat complex movements.
Okay, so that's good for like...
Particularly useful for ensuring consistency interactions from take to take.
Right, yeah.
But even with such an advanced puppet, CGI was still used to refine her movements.
Right.
Especially the tail, which proved particularly challenging to fully articulate practically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just a lot of moving parts on that thing.
Yeah, lots of moving parts.
Yeah. What about the Predator's weapons?
Sure.
Did they get any kind of like upgrade or modification to, take on such dangerous prey as the aliens?
Yeah.
They need to step up their game.
Yeah, the Predator's iconic wrist blades were noticeably larger and thicker in Alien versus Predator.
Okay.
Compared to previous films where, they were primarily targeting humans.
Right.
So the logical explanation, as suggested in some of the sources, is that, xenomorphs are far tougher and more resilient, adversary than humans.
Right.
Necessitating more substantial, powerful weaponry. It's like a hunter choosing a different caliber of rifle.
Right. You wouldn't bring a knife to a gunfight.
You wouldn't bring a knife to a tank.
Yeah, or a tank.
Exactly.
Yeah. I also came across some really interesting little details about how, the creature effects team, gave nicknames to some of the aliens and predators.
Yes.
And it's just like a personal touch,
Oh, it's lovely. And it often, reveals the passion and creativity of the people behind the scenes bringing these creatures to life.
Yeah.
The effects team at Amalgamated Dynamics, affectionately nicknamed the main predators, Scar, Celtic, and Chopper.
Okay.
Scar got his name because he, marks himself with the acidic blood
of
the aliens.
Okay.
Which is a ritualistic sign of a successful hunt.
Gotcha.
Celtic,
his
mask design was inspired by the intricate patterns of Celtic knotwork.
Oh, cool.
And Chopper was named for his, unusually long and formidable wrist blades.
Okay.
And then there was an alien that they dubbed Grid or Nethead.
Okay.
Because of the, the distinctive net-shaped scars that it had acquired.
Oh, that's interesting. So that was just kind of like...
fun little nicknames.
Yeah, very cool. And it seems that they also, they paid close attention to the design of the predator masks themselves.
They did.
To ensure like a connection to what came before.
They did.
Okay.
So Scar, Celtic, and Chopper.
Yeah.
Their mask designs were specifically based on the trio of predators that make that brief appearance at the very end of Predator 2.
Right. Okay.
So it's another subtle but deliberate nod that helps to link this film to the earlier Predator movies.
Gotcha, yeah.
For eagle-eyed fans.
Now for the human characters. Were there any visual cues in their costumes or their equipment that, maybe subtly connected them back to the alien universe?
There was a visual parallel that alien fans would likely appreciate.
Okay.
So the exploration team in Alien versus Predator wore color-coded uniforms.
Right, okay.
So the mercenaries were in silver coats.
Yeah.
The scientists and archaeologists were in yellow.
Okay.
Quinn's drilling team sported orange overalls.
Okay.
And this system, helps the audience quickly identify the different factions within the expedition, much like the distinct uniforms of the Nostromo crew in the original Alien.
Yeah. Very cool. I also read that the production designer went to the trouble of creating unique hieroglyphics.
Who did?
For the movie.
He did. That was Richard Brickland.
Okay.
The production designer.
Okay.
He, really put in that extra effort.
Wow.
To craft, original hieroglyphic symbols.
Right.
Specifically for the film.
Wow. So, like, no one's going to be out there deciphering those.
Well, maybe someone will.
Yeah.
It's out there now.
Yeah.
But, he added this other layer of authenticity and mystery to, that ancient civilization depicted within the Antarctic pyramid.
I mean, it makes it feel more real.
More real, more lived in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And for those real movie buffs out there, like who love catching those little on-screen moments.
Yes.
It sounds like there's even a couple of cameos.
There are.
To keep an eye out for.
Right at the beginning of the movie.
Okay.
So after the title sequence.
Yeah.
Keep a close watch.
Okay.
Special effects designers, Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis.
Okay.
They make brief appearances.
Okay.
As the technicians who first detect that unusual heat bloom.
Oh.
Emanating from the buried pyramid.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so let's shift our focus now, I guess, to the actual story of the film. The central premise, I guess, is that Antarctica isn't just this frozen wasteland. It's an ancient battleground.
Precisely.
Right.
The film establishes this backstory.
Yeah.
Where for centuries, predators have been traveling to Earth, specifically to this hidden pyramid.
Right.
Buried deep beneath Antarctica to engage in ritualistic hunts of the aliens as a rite of passage for their young warriors.
Oh, okay. So it's like
it's a crucial part of their development.
Well, it's like a coming of age.
A proving ground,
Yeah.
These predators.
Yeah, and the human expedition kind of stumbles into this ancient conflict.
Right.
Completely oblivious to what's really going on.
Exactly. In 2004, Charles Bishop Weyland's advanced satellite technology detects that unusual heat signature emanating from that buried pyramid. And his ambitious expedition team inadvertently triggers a new hunt.
Oh, right.
Unleashing both predators and a fresh brood of aliens.
Right. Yeah. I remember the tagline for the movie was pretty foreboding, Yes. Whoever wins, we lose. And it turns out they even cleverly incorporated that message into the film itself.
From the start.
Yeah, how did they do that?
So the Morse code that the satellite picks up at the very beginning of the film actually spells out that tagline.
Oh, wow.
Whoever wins, we lose.
That's such a cool little Easter egg.
It is.
I didn't pick up on that.
It's a little blink and you'll miss it moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, something I found interesting while I was looking at all this was that the actual words, alien and predator, are never actually spoken.
They are not.
By any of the characters in the movie.
Correct.
Why is that?
Well, throughout the film's dialogue,
the
creatures are consistently referred to by other terms.
Okay.
So the aliens are called, it, creature, or even serpent. The predators are typically called hunters.
Okay.
Or humanoids.
Gotcha.
And I think it's a stylistic choice that perhaps aims to reflect the human character's initial lack of understanding about the true nature and origin of these beings. They could also, contribute to the mystery and the unknown.
Yeah. I also noticed some visual similarities between the interior design of the pyramid and the Nostromo in the original Alien movie.
Yes.
Were those intentional nods, do you think?
There are some very deliberate visual homages woven into the production design.
Okay.
So, for example, the arrangement of the altars in the sacrificial chamber where the human hosts are placed to incubate the alien embryos bears a striking resemblance to the layout of the hibernation pods on the Nostromo in Ridley Scott's Alien.
Yeah.
So, it creates this subconscious connection.
Right. Yeah.
For fans of that earlier film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like they also included a subtle visual reference to Alien.
Yes.
As well.
In the set design.
Yeah, which is kind of
it's a deep cut.
Yeah, a deeper cut from
If you look closely at the design on the floor of the sacrificial chamber, you'll notice this distinct pattern that mirrors the artwork used on the poster for David Fincher's Alien.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I think these kinds of visual callbacks are, serve as a way to acknowledge and connect Alien versus Predator to the broader Alien cinematic universe.
Right.
Even though, its place within the official continuity
has been debated.
Yeah, has been debated.
Yeah.
One of the, I guess, more talked about aspects of the film, especially among longtime fans, was the somewhat surprising alliance that forms between a human, Alexa Woods, and a predator, Scar.
Right.
How did that kind of unusual partnership come about?
Well, that concept of the unlikely alliance actually has its origins in the Alien versus Predator comic book series.
Oh.
Published by Dark Horse, which, as we've discussed earlier, predates this film by many years.
Right.
And, the original Predator film hinted at a certain respect between the predator and his human prey.
Right.
So Alien versus Predator takes this idea a step further, showing Alexa earning Scar's respect through her tenacity, combat skills, and resilience in the face of, unimaginable danger.
Right.
And their shared enemy becomes that, the foundation for their temporary truce.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly.
And Scar himself seems to break some established predator traditions or behaviors in this film. He's a bit different.
He's a bit different. He's notable for a couple of things.
Yeah.
He's the first leading predator in the film series who doesn't utilize vocal mimicry.
Oh, right.
Which, was a tactic we often saw them use.
Right, in the earlier films.
In the earlier films to confuse and lure their targets.
Yeah.
And he's also the first to be explicitly shown using a shuriken.
Right, that throwing star, which
adds a new dimension to their combat abilities.
It seems like the Predators have their own unique ways of marking significant achievements or successful hunts.
They do.
It's almost like a warrior tradition.
Yeah, like a warrior tradition.
Yeah.
So the film introduces this idea that they mark themselves with the acidic blood of the aliens as a symbol of a successful hunt.
Right.
A testament to their bravery and skill.
Right.
And we actually see Scar performing this ritual, which is how he gets his nickname.
Right, yeah.
From the crew. The scars left by the acid.
Yeah, and the way the movie ends definitely teases the possibility of further encounters.
It does.
And a continuation of the story. I mean, that final shot is
unforgettable.
Yeah, pretty unforgettable.